Now, the rest of the story. One afternoon, as Percy Brigham was sitting behind his big desk at the Blanco Bank, there came a soft knocking at his office door. It was his receptionist. There was a young man outside, the woman said, a teenager who wanted to speak with the bank president. Who was he? What did he want? Mr. Brigham wondered aloud. The young man gently nudging the receptionist aside, the young man said, "I would be glad to answer that. I'm Sam's boy," he told Mr. Brigham, "and I need a student loan." The bank president squinted as though momentarily puzzled, and then it dawned on him. Sam's boy, of course. Years ago, Mr. Brigham had known Sam's father-in-law, the young man's grandpa. Sam's boy, of course. He must come in and sit down. The young man did. Now, what was this student loan that he wanted? The youngster hung his head. "You probably know about my daddy, don't you?" he asked Mr. Brigham. The bank president nodded. Old Sam was going through some pretty hard times. Once well-to-do and respected, he had lost everything a few years back, and now Sam was known as the man who owed everybody in town, had even become a laughingstock. His family probably would have starved had it not been for the charity of friends and relatives. It had all happened during the worst possible time of his son's life, high school years. The youngster had a particularly bitter memory of standing in the courthouse square, watching the girl who had been his sweetheart drive by with another young man. Her parents had told her that she must have nothing to do with any of Sam's kin. What kind of further schooling did Sam's boy want? Mr. Brigham asked. Teacher's college, the teenager answered. He wanted to be a teacher. His folks had scraped up $25, but he would need at least $100 to get him started. "I'll work my way through the rest of it," he told Mr. Brigham, "but now I just need a start." The Blanco Bank was the boy's last chance. All of the other banks had turned him down, said he was too young to qualify for a student loan. Mr. Brigham knew it was true. "You are technically underage," he told the young man. But then after a long silence he added, "However, you're overdue for a good break." And Mr. Brigham granted the loan, authorized it personally. Well, Sam's boy went on to college and became editor of the school newspaper, worked every odd job that he could find, graduated, taught high school English, eventually became principal of Wellhausen School. But let's flash forward. Sam's boy has long since grown to manhood. When he learns that bank executive Percy T. Brigham has died, the one-time boy student, drops everything and flies back home for that funeral. He owes it to Mr. Brigham, he says, for had he not broken the rules, had he not granted a $75 loan at a critical crossroads in the young man's life, the rest of that life might have turned out very differently. You see, when Sam's boy heard Mr. Brigham had passed away, he was holding down an important job of his own. By then he was behind the big desk in our nation's capital. Yes, you too know Sam's boy. Only you know Sam's boy as the 36th President of the United States, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Only now you know the rest of the story.
And now, the rest of the story. Student loans are often in the news these days. Now, I may gripe and groan about my own student loans, but they allowed me to get a good education and to do something I love, research. But in the 1930s, when Lyndon Johnson was trying to find ways to pay for college, student loans such as the ones I received were not available. Luckily, he had Percy Brigham. Percy Travis Brigham was born in 1878. Percy worked for the Blanco National Bank for 57 years and was president of that bank from 1940 to 1964. That time frame, 1940 to 1964, is important here. You see, Lyndon asked for the loan in 1927, 13 years before Percy became president of the bank. You see, Percy took a pretty big gamble loaning money to Lyndon, but of course we know of Lyndon's success. Percy may not have expected Lyndon to become president. but he knew he would at least be successful enough to repay that loan. Shortly after Percy's retirement, Bill Porterfield, a reporter for the Houston Chronicle, called Percy and asked for an interview. Percy agreed, but only if the interview was done face-to-face. The reporter asked how long it would take to get from Johnson City to his house. "Well," Percy responded in a soft southern drawl, "if you're walking, it might take a day or two. But if you're driving, you'll probably be here before I finish lunch, and I just sat down at the table." Now, Blanco is just about 14 miles south of Johnson City. Just as Percy predicted, he had just finished his lunch when the reporter drove up. He told the reporter, "Let's talk in my office at the bank. My wife's not feeling too well today." Percy and his wife, Annie, were both in their 80s. So Percy and the reporter walked to the bank and to Percy's old office. Above Percy's desk was a portrait of Lyndon Johnson taken when he was a senator. During the interview, Percy explained that the Baines family, that's Lyndon Baines, Johnson's mother's side of the family, came from Blanco, and the Johnsons, Lyndon's father's family, came from Johnson City. Johnson City was established in 1878 and was named after James Johnson, a nephew of Lyndon Johnson's grandfather. Percy Brigham's connections to the Johnson family went back to the early 1900s when Percy worked in the Blanco law office of Judge Joseph Baines. Now, this was Lyndon Johnson's maternal grandfather. Percy said, "Judge Baines was one of the great men of Texas. I learned more law under him than I ever did at the University of Texas." Judge Baines's daughter, Rebecca, that's Lyndon's mother, was raised in Blanco. Percy said, "She was one of the smartest women I've ever known. That's where Lyndon got his brains. His old daddy, Sam, was straight as a shingle." The reporter asked if it was true that Lyndon came to him in 1927 after being turned down from a loan to go to Southwestern State Teachers College in San Marcos, Texas, by the Johnson City Bank, and asked if he had any idea Lyndon would amount to anything. Well, Percy replied, "Oh, Lyndon was a bright, hard-working boy, but let's don't talk about that loan. That's Lyndon's business, not mine. His only response about the loan was, 'I can tell you he paid it back promptly.'" Mr. Harvey said Percy loaned Lyndon $75 for college, but I had a difficult time trying to pin down the exact amount. You see, the Lubbock Avalanche said Lyndon got a loan for $25. On April 18, 1965, Lyndon's wife, Lady Bird Johnson, recorded this in her audio diary.
"I'd worn my blue two-piece silk dress and stiff, prim sailor hat with a big bow, and felt quite satisfied for once. After church, we found ourselves at the head of a long caravan, Lyndon driving. We went past the house that Mrs. Johnson had lived in as a young woman. In fact, spent most of her life there until she married. A comfortable-looking stone house on the banks of the river. It must have been quite impressive 65 years ago. And then we went by a nursing home to see Mr. Percy Brigham, the banker from whom Lyndon had borrowed $50 to go off to San Marcos to school back in 1927, and he'd helped us in all the campaigns since. Long ago, he'd been Lyndon's grandfather's law partner, one of the two big men of the town. Lyndon showered him with pictures and presents. Oakey quietly took some pictures of them together. In the coin of human dealings, it was time well spent.
According to Lady Bird Johnson, Lyndon borrowed $50 from Percy's bank. $25, $50, $75? Regardless of the exact amount, Lyndon borrowed money from the bank with Percy's approval, and he paid it back in full. Percy and Lyndon remained lifelong friends. This wasn't the only time Lyndon borrowed money from Percy's bank. In 1952, Percy helped him with the land, which became the LBJ Ranch. Lyndon was a senator at the time. You see, as a teenager, Lyndon spent summers helping out on his Uncle Clarence Martin's cattle ranch along the Pedernales River. Johnson's attachment to this land was strong. He was born just down the road on a farm which had originally been settled by his grandfather. Lyndon had fond memories of family gatherings at the Martin house and dreamed of becoming a rancher. In 1951, Johnson's widowed aunt gave him that chance. In return for her lifetime right to Johnson's mother's house in Johnson City, Frankie Martin gave her dilapidated 250-acre ranch to Lyndon. She died in December of the same year. Lyndon soon began what became a continual series of improvements and enlargements to the newly christened LBJ Ranch. Not everyone was confident that Senator Lyndon Johnson could become a successful rancher. When Lyndon applied for a loan to purchase the cattle, Percy told him, "Lyndon, if you want to just walk around in yellow cowboy boots and proclaim yourself a rancher, that's one thing. But if you intend to make money ranching, I hope you know something about cattle." But of course we know he did know a thing or two about ranching, but he was smart enough to know that he couldn't continue in politics while handling the daily operations of a huge ranch that grew to include 400 head of Hereford cattle on 2,700 acres. For that, he depended on ranch foreman Dale Mailcheck. Lyndon was as hands-on as he could be while he went from senator to vice president and then to president of the United States. Even while president, while the Vietnam War was going on, Lyndon made nearly daily phone calls to Dale to discuss everything from the weather to cattle prices. Now, I'm sure that must have been frustrating for Dale. The LBJ Ranch proved to be important politically. Lyndon hosted numerous notable guests, including Presidents Richard Nixon and Harry Truman, President-elect John F. Kennedy, Reverend Billy Graham, and many, many more. Lyndon loaded visitors into one of his white Lincoln Continental convertibles for personalized, high-speed tours of the ranch. 88-year-old Percy Travis Brigham died on October 6, 1966. Lyndon had visited him just 2 weeks before his death. Lyndon was in New Jersey lambasting the GOP when he learned of Percy's death. Lyndon, the President of the United States, what some people call the most important man in the world, changed all of his plans to fly to Texas to attend the funeral of a small-time bank president. Well, but you and I know Percy meant more to Lyndon than just business. They were lifelong friends. A year and a half later, on May 31st, 1968, President Lyndon Johnson shocked the world in a televised address. Let's take a look.
With America's sons in the field far away, with America's future under challenge right here at home, with our hopes and the world's hopes for peace and the balance every day, I do not believe that I should devote an hour or a day of my time to any personal partisan causes or to any duties other than the awesome duties of this office, the presidency of your country. Accordingly, I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
Wow. Now, I wasn't alive when he made that speech, but I can imagine how shocking it must have been. When his term ended on January 20th, 1969, he retired to his ranch. Lyndon loved his time at that ranch. He and his wife wanted to leave a legacy with the ranch, so they donated a portion of it to the Lyndon B. Johnson National Historic Site with the stipulation that it remain a working ranch and not just a relic of the past. Lyndon Johnson died on January 22, 1973, and is buried in the Johnson Family Cemetery on the LBJ Ranch. The National Park Service still maintains a herd of Hereford cattle descended from Lyndon's stock and manages the ranch in the same style as it had under Lyndon. Now imagine for a moment how history would be different had Percy Brigham of the Blanco National Bank refused, if he'd have said no, to loan Lyndon Johnson the money to go to college like the other banks had done. It's much easier to say no than yes. This is one of those times I love when a single choice changed history. Without that loan, Lyndon Johnson most likely would not have become a teacher, senator, vice president, president of the United States. We all need a helping hand from time to time, and who knows, the next person we help may become the president of our great country. You never know. I'm Brad Dison. Thanks for watching, and now you know the rest of the story.